Welcome to another episode of Beat the Bogey. There's been news flow this week, as always. We've had an abundance of news from the communication services industry this week. Netflix reported, and we've also had news from Disney over the last several months about their entrance into the world of distribution of on-demand content. And so stay tuned in. We'll be right back with another exciting episode of Beat the Bogey. Okay, so we're here today. We're going to talk about the communications services industry. We're going to try to unlock some of the confusion that's been out there for some time about what's going on in this industry. This is an exciting industry for consumers, for investors. It's an industry that's clearly going through some significant change because of some disruption that's taken place from some major players in corporate America. Those players would be Amazon, Netflix, Google, Apple Computer. They've served to disrupt the industry, and the Lawrence Welk music that had been playing for some time for the cable providers and the old line content producers like Time Warner and Disney and whatnot, their whole world has been disrupted by these guys who are suddenly finding a way to provide content through an online, on-demand distribution format. And this has people talking. And there has been a lot of confusion, though, from the media. And our job here is to try to unlock that confusion and simplify what's going on and help our clients, our prospective clients, and ourselves better understand where the investment opportunities lie. Tell us what we know a little bit about the historical side of this communication services sector, Kyle. What do we know? Who are the players that have been out there for some time, and who are the new players that are disrupting the industry?
Sure. Yeah. So kind of the industry of old was quite dissimilar to what we have now, which is on demand. You kind of get content anytime you want it. It used to be basically, as we all know, kind of live. You had one opportunity to watch any given thing, and it was when it was airing on TV live, and that was it. And so you had some of the producers like Disney, Fox, that would produce content, and then you had the cable company distributors like a Cox, AT&T, and some others. And so that was kind of the old model. You would produce content and distribute it through a cable company and watch it live. And that's changed now significantly. Netflix kind of disrupted this about a decade ago. And it was just kind of moved towards convenience for the consumer, which was you could watch things on demand whenever you want.
So the game used to be all about the creation of content and the distribution of content through movie theaters, through cable TV, through television production channels and whatnot. And that business model has kind of been under siege and under attack by these new online distributors. And the main players in that game, as you say, are Netflix, Amazon, Google, Apple Computer. And this game has gotten so good that companies who were content-only creators for the most part are suddenly saying, oh my God, you guys are eating our lunch. Maybe we should get in that game.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so maybe Disney is one of these players who's looking around and saying, Netflix is making billions distributing our content and working a business model that has tremendous operating leverage, all to our detriment. And so what are they doing in response?
Right. Yeah, so Disney and others are kind of wanting to go the way of Netflix, which is having their own distribution channel. And this is, as you mentioned, the operating leverage is kind of what this is all about, where content producers used to license their productions to a distributor and get some kind of payment there. here, Netflix, for example, is highly leveraged to kind of anything that they license or produce themselves. They can just incrementally add, monthly paying consumers, and so they figured out how to get this great operating leverage out of the media model. And so these other production houses now, as you mentioned, Disney and others, are saying, well, why should, maybe we should do this ourselves, pull our production content back in-house, not distribute through Netflix, but have our own distribution channel, and we can charge consumers a monthly fee and get this great leverage to everything that we produce.
Yeah, I think what is envious about what these new disruptors are doing is the fact that they have a business model that doesn't have near the risk of the business model of the content creators. Disney spends, $100 million making a movie and doesn't really know if that rifle shot will hit its target. And not a tremendous amount of operating leverage to that model if they don't hit their target. And so they're looking at this world of distribution as a much lower risk model. At the same time, it's been really growthy as distribution has moved from traditional cable companies to online distributors like Netflix. And I guess the question that I think a lot of investors and investors mainly are asking is, where are we at in this phase of disruption? Is Netflix and Amazon still just kind of breaking the ice in terms of getting people to move from viewing content on traditional means? Are we 10, 20% into that cycle, or are we in the seventh inning of this ball game?
I think that's a good question. I don't think it's entirely clear how far along we are. I know that kind of amongst the younger generations, there's a lot of cable cutters, as we call them, myself included. And so I use Netflix, for example, and don't subscribe to traditional live TV any longer. But notwithstanding that it's not totally clear what inning we're in there, what's interesting, I think, is that as we're talking about this distribution model is very interesting. How much of a lead does somebody like Netflix or Amazon have, given what they've been doing in this space already? And for somebody like Disney and these other companies to now be saying, well, we should do this too. How much of a struggle is it going to be for them to compete with the distribution that Netflix, for example, already has?
Right. I mean, this is not a simple problem for these companies who have got caught, behind. Disney and a lot of your traditional, cable TV companies and content providers have really kind of gotten caught with their pants down, and they're trying to play catch up. And it's not clear if they can get into this distribution game because Netflix and Amazon have built quite a bit of an economic moat around their businesses.
Yeah.
And what I mean by an economic moat is how many people look at their the remote on their new Samsung TV and find the Netflix button on it or an Amazon button on it, but there's no Disney button on it. There's no Time Warner button on it. These guys have already kind of got themselves built into the consumer's hardware. And it's a bit of an economic moat. What do you think about that? Is that a shallow moat that Disney can just walk across easily? Or is that a deep, crocodile-infested moat that they're going to get savaged as they try to cross?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's... They might get savaged and ultimately come back and say, Netflix, please license our content and show it again on your distribution channel. You win. I think, looking at some of the data, most of what people are consuming of Netflix on-demand content, they're watching, on their TVs, like you say, with the Netflix button on the remote. It's one thing if they're watching it on a phone, and you can download another app or something to watch the Disney content. That's pretty easy, but it seems like a lot of people are, as much as they're consuming this new on-demand type of media, they're still doing it on a regular TV platform. So the ability to be ingrained in that method of distribution is very important, and Netflix has kind of gotten a huge head start in that game.
So, I mean, clearly, that's not easily answered easily, and we're not going to answer that today in our show, but I believe there is a substantial moat around Netflix's business, and Disney won't easily just cross that moat and take this business from these very strong players. And while they're trying to get into the distribution game, at the same time, their lunch is getting eaten now on the creation of content, and that Amazon and Netflix have become big players in the world of content creation. And the billions that they've made distributing other people's content, they've now invested into creating their own original content. And I believe something like 11% of the content that Amazon has on its platform is their own content. Is that right?
Yeah, that's about right. I think it was in just a few years ago, it was in the mid single digits, and now it's up above 11, 12% or so. And I think Netflix was kind of going this direction as they saw more recently, especially content that they were licensing getting pulled back. Disney saying, hey, you can't show this anymore because we're going to do this on our platform. So they were trying to get ahead of the game and producing some of their own content. But this just leads us to another moat that Netflix has already, which is that they've got a tremendous amount of data on what their users have been watching, what content exactly, what portions of the content, what they skip, what they don't. So if they're in a position to say, well, what should we make? What are our people watching? They know exactly what they're watching, probably better perhaps than anybody else, any other content producer.
Yeah, these distributors, they've been taking notes on what people watch, and they probably have better data than Disney has, or these other Time Warner, these have on what consumers want right now, because they have this deep bench of inventory that they've been watching people consume, and so they're in a great position to now create content. And the shakeup of Hollywood goes on. And Hollywood is reeling from what's happened with these players. I think Disney and Time Warner and some of these players who are trying to get in the game may well realize that what they're doing right now might be a mistake in trying to compete with the distributors. I think you can look at what's going on right now and say deja vu, right, with what happened with the retail industry back in the 90s when companies like Calvin Klein thought they had such great products that they didn't need to sell it at Nordstrom's anymore. And so they suddenly created their own stores in the mall and tried to market their clothes exclusively through their own stores. And what do we find out about that, Kyle?
Right, which is that those all failed, and everybody just wanted to go to the place where they could kind of find everything, which was the Nordstrom. Maybe a bit of almost arrogance, perhaps, on Disney's part by thinking, look, we've got this tremendously great content. People are going to come to us just for the things that we produce. Maybe not. It's a powerful brand, to be sure. But it might not be enough to get somebody to make the effort to trek down to the other side of the mall and go to their store.
Is Amazon and Netflix and Google really under siege here because Disney is saying you're not going to be able to use our content anymore, and some of these other players are not going to be able to use our content anymore? How big of a threat to them is that? And I guess it seems like it boils down a lot to who's out there in the space creating content, and it's a highly fragmented industry, isn't it? Isn't more than half of the content created from Hollywood comes from from a fragmented industry of small players who have no money at all to distribute their own content, and certainly couldn't compete with the likes of Netflix. And so aren't these companies just eager as heck to continue to sell their content off to players like Amazon and Netflix?
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right. As much as some of the content is being pulled from Netflix, it's fair to say there's probably an abundance of other smaller producers that are out there that would continue to be thrilled to distribute on Netflix's platform.
So the world of entertainment is an exciting world for consumers. It's an exciting world for investors. It's finally an industry that's growing. This was kind of an industry that was stagnant for a long time because of kind of the poor management that we got out of Hollywood. But now that we have some real business minds who've entered this industry, from the likes of Google and Amazon, Apple Computer, shaking up, Hollywood, this industry is back growing again, and it's exciting, the opportunities that are out there. And I think Netflix and Amazon, all these companies are well positioned. It'll be interesting to see how Disney does in this entrance into the industry, but I don't see this as anything that kind of brings down the curtain for Netflix, because suddenly Disney decides they don't want to sell their content temporarily through Netflix, right?
Right, perhaps temporarily. And you can see the suggested price that Disney has come out with for their on-demand content. It's less than half of what you can get Netflix for. So it seems like Disney's almost just trying to say, we hope you guys will do both, because you're not going to do just ours. As we talked about, Netflix has their own content and licensed content, this complete offering. Disney is kind of by no means a complete offering. So it's not a perfect competitor really at all for Netflix anyways.
Netflix reported over the last few weeks and said subscriber growth fell off in the U.S. It was actually negative for the first time ever, and subscriber growth globally was soft than expected. And investors like us have been having to weigh that information, but we also know it's combined with an awful lot of awful lot of change in their pricing model. And whenever a company raises prices, that's going to create some churn of subscribers. And so do we see this kind of churn as anything really concerning here?
It seems to be not all that concerning. It's just a little bit strange that as Netflix themselves admitted, this last earnings period was one in which they didn't really release a lot of great new content, which is either something that would keep an existing subscriber, on the platform who's thinking of leaving because they have nothing else to watch, or encourage somebody to sign up because they've got some great new show. Amidst that negative period of churn, for example, in content, they also had their prices increase. I think this was the biggest price increase that they've done historically. So those two things were kind of a double whammy. But maybe a bit of a unique event, and I don't think this is that their business model is being kind of unwound here.
Yeah, I think that the existing players, cable players are companies you got to keep on the back burner. Some of those players like Disney who are trying to get into the game the way it's being played today are companies you got to look at and you got to think about owning here. But at the same time, Netflix, a name that just dropped 10-15% because of some soft subscriber growth, might be a buy right now. It's probably not going to be the cheapest time in history to buy it, but it probably could end up being a great opportunity here. So with that, I think we've brought to close another episode of Beat the Bogey. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on our next episode.